believe that there are a number of individuals who significantly benefit from maintenance support. Were they to lose that support, they would degenerate. They're not making any more progress, but they're not falling behind either. I actually think that's a legitimate service. If you work with managed care, they're not going to pay you unless you can show improvement over time. And there's more and more pressure on systems like yours to get people off of public-funded dependencies. So it's an open question for you all to consider. Do you want to reward programs that can demonstrate that they are successful in moving people off dependency of the public system and integrating them into the private system? Is that something you value? Then it should be in the RFP evaluation. If it's not something you value, this question should be eliminated.
Is that something we've ever traced? We tracked?
Managed care transition.
No.
Are you under pressure to move people off?
We actually pressure treatment agencies to move people to Medicaid via contract language.
Okay.
That's the closest we get.
Okay. I mean, I'm not saying you have to adopt all these questions, but at least one organization where I work really felt that they either were being given a mandate to reduce dependency on the public system, or that they believed that this was significant of improvement in some of the mental health services, that you were able to get them to the point where they were no longer dependent on you. So it's just an open question as to whether or not that's something you even want to put into your scoring sheet.
Well,
Yeah.
Go ahead.
The mental health agencies themselves do that, by moving people from case management to meds only.
There you go.
So I don't know if that's pressure from the insurance companies or if they're just kind of doing that to show that.
I think the real tension here is, and this is just within the last few years, and I'm not sure whether it comes from the state level or the federal level, I think probably a combination. There is pressure to avoid what some people would perceive as stagnation. They don't want to have forever clients. So there are a lot of clients who figure, well, I get services from the board. Tell me what life is going to be like 30 years from now. Oh, I'll still be getting services from the board. It'll be exactly like it is now, adjusted for inflation. But, you know, this is where I get my services and I'll get them here forever. There are some organizations that say that is not a reasonable prediction of the future. Your goal should be to move on. So there is a real tension in the field, I think, because I think there are a lot of providers who are like, you've been my client for 20 years and we have done great work together and I'm happy to continue to be your provider because look how stable you are. There are others who will say, after 20 years, don't you think maybe it's time to go? So, I mean, that's a value judgment.
But isn't it also, it's a product of individual resource as well? I mean, if we're setting, well, I mean, you say could be, but the reality is it is. Because either you have the resources to get out of the public system, or you don't.
Sure. In any individual situation, that is true. But statistically, over thousands of clients, we should be able to determine whether or not there is inertia in the direction of getting people off dependency, or whether or not we are maintaining them as forever clients. So yes, in any particular individual's case, you might ask, does this person have sufficient resources or not? But this gets back to the what if the system is broken question, right? Like if one organization statistically is able to show that we are getting a higher percentage of our clients moving through the system and reducing their dependency compared to another agency that is doing very similar work, but their clients are forever clients, yes, in any one case, you could argue this client needs to stay or this client needs to go. But system-wide, can I demonstrate that this agency does a better job of moving people along than the other agency?
Let's move to a different problem.
Well, maybe. That's why you have to decide. You have to decide whether or not this matters to you. I'm not telling you that it should matter to you. I'm telling you that this is the field is actually split on this because there are pressures to reduce dependency. Then there are those who say, but you're not paying attention to the needs of the individual needs the same services for 20 years. That's what they need. You take that away from them, they're going to be in really bad shape. And yet, there are other organizations saying, we don't just accept the status quo, we want continuous quality improvement. Well, at some point, how continuous is your quality improvement? I mean, it's a question
Baseline is baseline.
for an individual, but over 10,000 cases, am I witnessing statistically a move towards independence? It's very possible that some programs actually have found ways to help people become more independent. Other programs might be happy sitting on their laurels and saying we do really good direct support. Which would you prefer to fund? A program that over time, I'm not talking about ripping services away from people, but would you rather support a program that over time assists individuals in a statistically demonstrable way to increase their personal independence? Or would you rather support a program that just says, this is where you are, stasis is good, let's just hold it together? I think that there are a lot of folks who would argue moving people towards independence is preferable. In which case it should be measurable. In which case you can score it. In which case you can reward it.
Okay, I don't disagree with anything you just said, but you changed the dynamic when you went from individual independence from systems dependence. Because you can individually become more independent with the work that's being done in the provider system, but still be systems dependent on the board paying that.
I'm with you. I'm with you on that. Yeah, sure. A shell game doesn't help anybody, right?
Right.
Yeah, so I got you off that service, but now I stuck you in another service that's just as costly and, right? Yeah. I agree. You're absolutely correct. The question that's being asked here is, effectively, are people being able to, does the system help people move from the public provision of services into the private sector? That's really what this is, and it's really driven by managed care that says we're not going to reimburse stability. We only want to reimburse improvement, which I think is an ethical problem. I mean, I do. I think it's an ethical problem to make that the measure. Nevertheless, it's a stressor that's in the environment, so you have to decide as an agency, as a board, how much does that matter to you? Maybe it doesn't, in which case, get rid of it.
Well, I think, not that we need to belabor this any longer, but I think it's really interesting that the managed care companies are the ones driving that conversation when they only pay for treatment and none of those other services that we fund that make those individuals or help those individuals become truly independent and successful.
Sure. I mean, frankly, managed care would be happy if they just died, because then they're cheaper, right? And that's not the outcome you want.
Correct.
Yeah, so I'm with you. I agree with you. Yeah.
A lot of people, when they've been there for a long time, are there any stats that show once you cut them loose, how many of those people relapse?
Beautiful. We want to know that too. Yeah, absolutely. Look, this is a debate. I'm not giving you an answer here. I am one of the organizations where I work, one of your sister organizations right here in Ohio, felt that this was a reasonable thing for us to ask. Are you helping people reduce their system dependence? You might very well say, in Toledo, we're not asking that question.
I can see a population of people, like the public opinion, I mean, that is common.
Yeah.
Arguments, or even just like tax type of people, so, but just knowing how to communicate that, because I mean, especially our population. I don't know what I'm trying to say.
No,
But,
the reverse tension will also exist, because if you just cut people off from services, but then more people end up sleeping under bridges, the public's gonna be pretty pissed off that now you're not doing what you need to help these people from that marginal existence, right? So, look, you're gonna be damned if you do, damned if you don't, to some degree, right? It's a values question you need to ask yourself. If you're not asking yourself these kinds of values questions, then you're not really thinking carefully about how you want to spend your dollars. So you could answer this question by saying, this is not a value that we are going to chase. We are not going to measure those stats. We are very, very concerned that it's just a shell game and that you could show me that you're getting people off your service, but I want to know what happens to them once they're off your service. And if they're creating more pressure elsewhere in the system, that's not desirable. So what you'd have to do if you really wanted to ask this question is you'd have to look for outcome measures. You would not want to just say, do they or do they not continue to receive services from you? You'd actually have to ask, according to published key performance indicators, what percentage of your clients are moving from high acute needs to lower, lesser needs? That would be a different way of asking the same question that actually might comport better with your values.
Agreed.
If we're gonna squeeze a balloon on that, it's gonna.
Something's gonna, well, unless they actually get better.
Yeah.
Okay, let's keep looking. Higher priority will be given to innovative evidence-based programs that respond to existing and emerging community needs. Again, a values question. Do you want to reward innovation? New need is emerging in your community and nobody's serving it. If a new program came to you and said, we have a really good idea about how we could meet this new emerging need, should they get extra points in the competition because they are being innovative and responding to a newly identified emerging need, as opposed to the folks who are just happy doing what they've done forever? Again, no one question is going to rule you in or out. The question is whether or not you earn extra points for doing this. You still might suck in so many other ways that even with these extra points, you're not going to get any money.
Yeah.
But it could be that you and another organization are pretty close in terms of performance, and this could be the tiebreaker. This could be the thing that says, look, you both do pretty good stuff, but you're being pretty creative and you're looking at stuff that no one's looked at before that is an unmet need in our community. I want to give that a shot. Right? So don't assume that these questions are all going to determine funding or not funding. These questions contribute to an overall score that then can be used to make comparative, relativistic evaluations of this program versus that one. Your hand was up? No. Higher priority will be given to organizations that have demonstrated a reliable ability to utilize resources in the amounts and manner for which they have been historically requested. I honestly do think that if an organization comes back to you every year, mid-year, for additional money, right, maybe once or twice, they couldn't have seen something coming, there was an unforeseen explosion in their boiler room, or, all right, fine. But if every year you're coming back, what you're telling me is you don't know how to operate this program. You don't understand what a budget is. Budgets are not exact documents. They are planning documents, and they have to be flexible, because things will come and go throughout the year. But they should be within a ballpark, and if you're consistently overspending and coming back saying, I need more money or else we're gonna put people on the street, I gotta ask you, why do you continually misjudge the need if they're underspending? And at the end of the year after year, they have hundreds of thousands of dollars left over, then you should be asking, well, why are you still asking for that larger amount? This history would suggest you don't need it. And the worst of this would be, I would like your money to operate Program A. You come back next year and you say, so how did it go? Well, we decided Program A was not so great. So you know what? We just took the money and did Program B. And you should be like, excuse me? I gave you money for Program A. I didn't give you money for You need to come back to me and ask if we will reallocate the money from Program A to Program B. You don't get to make that decision, we do. We might say yes. Give us a good reason why you want to shift your goals in mid-year. We might give you the green light, say go for it. But don't come back after and tell me, yeah, we spent the money in a way that you didn't know or intend. That should, your score should plummet. I saw some smiles.
Now, it happens in micro conversations. It's not a big program.
Right,
A
whole program
says,
closes,
I'm doing B. What they do is they say, okay, we funded this, we're doing mostly that, but we're not gonna do that portion in which we valued to begin with.
They should have to come back to you
We
mid-year.
entirely agree.
They should have to be able to say, here is our rationale for why we need to make a shift, and you should be able to then say, that makes sense, go for it. Or you should be able to say, claw back, you're not gonna spend it the way for what we gave it to you for, we got better uses for it somewhere else. Yeah.
Yeah, I'm thinking that decision, at what point, and it happened recently in one board, at what point does those micro decisions, the exception overrides the priority rule? that we have set up a priority,
Right.
but they keep they keep adding up those micro decisions, and at some point, as an attorney, I'm thinking, the exception has taken over the rule, a priority, the rule doesn't exist, the exception now controls, so everything that we did in the past is gone.
I like it. I like that. I'm gonna quote you on that. The exception becomes the rule. Is that what you said? Yeah, I like it.
It happened recently, and I was gonna bring it up, but okay, maybe it's a one-time issue, but the director just, it happens.
Okay, here's my response.
Pardon me?
Here's my response. It shouldn't ever happen. Because the exception shouldn't really be an exception. What do I mean by that? The way that it could work without problem is we have priority alpha. We applied for money because this structure of program we thought would help us achieve goal alpha. Okay? Midway through the year, we realized we were missing the mark. The program we had set up is not achieving that goal. But we learned from that how we could achieve that goal. So we want to shift the funding from what we intended, we thought was going to be the way we spend it, to a different way to spend it. But it's still in service to the same goal. That's when you guys should say, thank you for bringing it to our attention. You are correct that alpha is still our major goal. You have a green light. We'll reallocate the dollars, go for it. The problem is, when alpha is the goal, and a program applies to achieve alpha, and midway through the year they say, yeah, we're not going to do alpha. We're not going to achieve alpha. Let's achieve beta. And they shift to a program that actually has a different goal. That's when you should say, oh, no. This money was spent in service of goal alpha. Now, if you come to us mid-year and you say you've learned something, your first try wasn't working, you have a different idea, but it's still in service to the same ultimate goal, we're probably going to say go for it. But you don't get to decide what the priorities are. So my answer to you would be, there is never a case when the exception becomes the rule if what we're talking about is priorities. There could be plenty of times when the exception becomes the rule if we're talking about program-specific allocations. But program-specific allocations are always in service to the greater goal. And the fund-ed organizations don't get to define those goals, you do. Now, they might know better than you how to achieve that goal. I mean, they're the boots on the ground, right? So if they come back to you and say, hey, the reality in the real world has changed, right? And we need to adjust because we still want to do what you want us to do, then go for it. But the priority setting is yours, not theirs. Last thing on this slide. Lower priority will be given to funding any programs or services that organizations other than the board are mandated to provide. Someone else has a mandate to do it, get out of that business. Unless, of course, it's just a thoroughly underserved population and you believe that your effort is not truly redundant with the other efforts. The example I always use is being eligible for VA services should almost be a rule out for being one of your clients. Because they can go to the VA.
What if the closest VAs?
Detroit and Arlington?
Careful. Here's my caveat. The VA actually has to be a real option, not a paper option. So if their wait list is 3 years long, then even though technically you're eligible for VA services, you're not going to get them for 3 years, that's not a real option for you. In which case, you're still ruled in for us. It could deal with transportation issues, it could deal with wait lists, it could deal with lots of things. But if there's a real option for an alternative, then they should seize it. If it's not a real option, if it's just a paper tiger, then
I just dealt with that one specifically.
oh, I know. Especially because of wait lists. I mean, the VA run, or historically has run really long wait lists.
So I think this is a good place to take a break.
Yeah, let me show you one last slide and then we quit.
I tried.
You try it. One last slide. Because it's a quick slide. This now is the updated Stark version of 2025. And we fiddled with the numbers so that we could get reasonable separation. But when they got each one of these little symbols, so they're all over here, I've redacted it so you don't see any names or identifiers. Each one of these little symbols is a program that has applied for funding. They are broken into 5 priority categories. 5th priority category, notice, none of these are ever, they can't compete with any of these. There's actually some good ones here that beat some of the bad ones here. Nevertheless, this is like your prevention stuff. It will compete amongst itself. Okay? These 4 priorities, they're all in competition for the main dollars. We might say all of these are high priority and they're all scoring very highly. Like, we're going to fund them. These, probably also. But I want you to notice, there are some priority 4 programs that are doing better than some bad priority 3 programs. I'm going to prefer to fund these and cut funding off for these. Okay? So within all of these areas, I can make a decision. You know what? In order, these are mission critical, even though they're lower priority. I got to fund some of these top ones. In order to make that happen, I'm going to cut off some of the low performing ones over here. Maybe even this one over here. That looks like an outlier. Okay? So I am now able to visualize the relative performance of all of the programs that have applied for funds based on the questionnaire that I created. It doesn't say if you score below 100, you don't get funding. What it says is, if you scored 45, and I got to make a choice between you and a competitor in the same priority area that scored a 145, you're out of luck. And it's not binary. It could be they'll get 100%. They'll get a smaller percentage of what they requested. They'll get nothing. So it becomes a very actionable. Let's stop. Take a break. Back.
take a few minutes to just talk a little bit before Dr. Gillette proceeds. It occurred to us that not everyone might be on the same page in relation to how we currently do allocations for the next fiscal year. So I'm gonna do my best to ad lib a process that we use internally to help you understand how board staff come to make a recommendation to you for continuing services. And I guess it's a good opportunity to do that today, because next Tuesday, you'll be getting your first set of recommendations regarding fiscal year 27. Remind you, we're on state fiscal year. Fiscal year 27 starts July 1 through June 30th, 2027. So we are largely a historically funding body, meaning you currently run an open RFP process, request for proposal process. The understanding is if you've met your matrix, you met your outcomes, you met your outputs, and you've spent the money the way you were supposed to spend them, in years past, you could be reasonably assured that you are going to get funding the following year. In and I'm going to just digress for a second. In 2012, we passed a new levy. It was the first new money we've had in 24 years. At that point, we distributed that money over a 4-year process based on our priorities at the time. Crisis and treatment, housing and support, prevention, all separate buckets. It's important to recognize that because some of those priorities that we established back then in those buckets are some of the same programs that we continue to fund now. So historically, we had identified priorities and we had put these programs in buckets. Now, when a new program or a new service that we desire bubbles up, most times we would do an open RFP. But mind you, the open RFP is usually based on, are you a current contract agency? That might be yes or no. Sometimes we will do it to anyone, but our rules say nonprofit, certified by the Department of Behavioral Health Services for the services that you're applying for, regardless of what that is. We require not just treatment agencies to be certified, we require prevention agencies to be certified, we require housing to be certified as mental health support, which is different than some groups. So we let a contract out, or you guys, board staff, make a recommendation based on our observations of how that organization has done over the years. Did they spend their money? Did they meet their outcomes? What did their 6-month outcomes look like? All that's reported to you. What is their most up-to-date information look like? Because up until this year, we had a partial second half year, right? So we gave you the first 6 months, and then we had a couple of months worth of data after that to evaluate. Because remember, we had this 120-day notice process. We no longer have that next contract year. So we'll have a longer period of time to make these decisions. Recommendations come to you in the form of planning and oversight, some recommendation. We list out the programs, the agencies. We would have already given you a program description in a separate document. And then depending upon our financial forecast, Jenny would calculate and we would talk internally about who should get the 2% increase or not. If you're not meeting, if you're marginally meeting your outcomes, you haven't spent your money, You might receive a 120-day notice to reduce that allocation or to dramatically change the program. If you wanted to change your program as an agency, you would give us a 120-day notice to say, hey, we want to do X. That never occurs. Normally, we would have those conversations at the staff level. We then come to you and say, okay, these are the things that we think are necessary to meet our mandates from Ohio Revised Code, Chapter 340, which is a continuum of care requirements. We make those allocations, you decide on them finally, and then we let out contracts. All contracts have requirements for inputs and or outputs and outcomes, and all have a budget that is based on now federal guidelines. Is that the right way to say that, Jenny?
Yeah.
So they all align with the way the feds track dollars. We get quarterly reports for financials that are reviewed internally. We also do ongoing compliance monitoring. We have program staff that are available to and meet with programs monthly to just check and see how things are doing. We have finance folks that are reviewing the financing to make sure that they are spending monies the way they should, and identifying any deviations. If deviations are identified, then sometimes it'll be finance staff that reach out, sometimes it'll be program staff, depending upon what we think the real issue. We also have internal outcomes tracking that are part of these conversations that the IT team and Julian folks track and then feed into the 6-month report that you see and the final annual report that we see. So all of that feeds into what you had previously known as the 120-day notice for recommendation for changes, which will now whittle itself down to 60 days of if we're going to renew you or not. So that's kind of a nutshell, very quick process on how we go from funding somebody 1 year to funding them the next year. So I wanted to give some context because we just needed to make sure that while there's a lot of things on these slides that we should be doing, some of them we're doing, some of them we're not. And some we could be doing better, and some maybe we shouldn't do at all. And I won't know what that is until you guys tell me what it is.
Excellent. All right. I have one slide left to show you. And then it's really open discussion time to figure out where we're going next, how we're going to get there. We could start some conversations about priorities, but frankly, this might not be the setting for that right now. You guys have stuck with us for hours now, doing some pretty thick thinking. So I'm going to let Scott decide how long we go into the afternoon, whether he dismisses you early or whether we go to the wee hours. It's up to you to decide whether or not you bring dinner in and dinner in. I think the answer to that is no.
We do not have money for that.
I got nowhere to be.
So let me just, I want to share with you my last slide, and then I want to just answer any questions you have, entertain any discussion you want to have, and then sort of begin the process as far as you want to take it today. So the rest of the afternoon is pretty unstructured. Yeah.
Can you look at copies of
The
the
PowerPoint?
slides that you have presented?
Absolutely. In fact, Elijah already has the PowerPoint, although I think I'm going to send you a new one that adds the movie theater, a nice graphic of the movie theater. I have that, I can stick it in there and I'll send you an updated version. But yes, you are all absolutely free to have a copy of the PowerPoint.
Plagiarize it?
Well, if you use it somewhere else, give me credit, that's all. I'm gonna have to trust you. Maybe I should charge more
It's
for
just,
my
there were some
services.
great things in there that deserve repeating in other organizations.
Yeah, right.
And the name of for organization.
So here's just the last slide. which talks about, all right, what are the steps that we can follow to take everything we've talked about today and to actually put it into place? Because it's useless if it's just a philosophical conversation, okay? This is applied ethics. This is rubber meets the road. Actually, let's make a difference. And I'm glad to hear that you're already doing a lot of the stuff that I would recommend. There may be some things I can add to that, and as you said, there may be some things here that just don't fit this personality, and it's something you want to stay away from. We need to tailor a process that meets the specific needs of this agency in its current environment. So step number one, this is sort of where I would go next. Okay? So I'm just outlining the steps after this introductory day. These are the steps that I would now follow and probably will be engaged in online with some subset of you. Step number one is development of a values inventory. Okay? And by a values inventory, I don't just mean priority populations, priority services. What I really mean by that is, what are the things you want to measure when you evaluate an application for funding? What do you want to judge? Which can include things like priority populations, priority services, those sorts of things, but it also includes other things like, is this a reliable partner? Right? Like, do they do what they say they're going to do? Do they say what they're going to do? Can we work well with them? I even have one one organization, one of your sister organizations, I'm not going to name any names, and one of the things they wanted to add into their inventory of values was, in talking about are you a good partner, they have a contractual requirement that if they sponsored, say, an activity and advertising was going on, their logo needed to show up. And some of those organizations were just not showing the logo. They would get big billboards and there's no logo, right? I'm sorry. I like the logo. It's a nice looking shirt. You're good.
We have a whole page in our contract dedicated to logo.
But they don't read it.
Whole thing.
They don't read it.
So, is that a 10 weight question that you're going to ask? A 50 weight. Actually, that's not even a joke, right? Like part of what you need to do is you need to be able to get credit for the. Wait a minute, why is your logo in color and his is just black and white?
Branding standards.
Ooh.
Branding.
You're supposed to have a consistent theme.
Yeah, we do.
We do have one, but back here, the
Both fall in the bind.
producer.
Took liberties. Okay.
It's a little bit more pink than we'd like, but.
All right. So I did not mean to touch a nerve. Oh, there's the really pink one. You guys do not have brand discipline. I'm gonna tell you right now. I know someone, if you wanted a referral for a good consultant. So all kidding aside, I didn't mean to necessarily touch such an obviously sensitive nerve. But the point would be, oh, and you're also light pink. Now I'm going to be scanning the room to see. Oh my God! How many do you have?
Let's just say it's an evolution.
I think so. I don't think that you're going to wait. Did you put our logo on your billboard as heavily as you're going to wait? Do you serve people who will crash and burn without services? But let's just be honest about this. This is a value, right? So my point is that step number one is to do as complete a value inventory as possible. Not to say that all values will have equal weight, but we need to assess what it is you want to know about a program or an organization that will inform your judgment. And it's very important to realize that you can over-ask, in which case you are just creating a burden for no good reason, and that wastes resources. Every minute that someone spends on a task is a minute they cannot spend on an alternate task. So you should not be asking for information that does not impact your decision-making. If it's irrelevant information, stop asking for it. because that's just a waste of everybody's time. It means they have to spend time collating the information, and then you have to spend time sorting the information, and it turns out it has absolutely no impact whatsoever. To give you an example of this, I often say to groups, it didn't come up today, we weren't talking about cases, but I often tell groups, you know, like your mom probably told you there's no such thing as a stupid question. That's wrong. There can be stupid questions. I mean, the example I always like to give is, you know, patients in the hospital, we have to decide should we or should we not treat them. They are saying no. We have to decide should we treat them over their objections. And then people ask all sorts of questions. Well, what about this? What about that? So I slow them down. I say, no, whoa. Some questions are just stupid. So for instance, patient needs treatment. Should we treat over objections? You might ask, was he wearing a green shirt that day? And I say, yes, by the way, he was. And you say, well, then you should treat him over his objections. So then I say, well, wait, whoa. Actually, it wasn't green. He was wearing a red shirt that day. And then you say, oh, well, if it's a red shirt, you should treat him over his objections. What have we just learned?
Doesn't matter.
The color of his shirt doesn't change the outcome, which means that was an irrelevant question and you just wasted my time. It was a stupid question. The color of, I should say logo, does not impact, a particular choice you're making. So, when you do a values inventory, you need to identify the questions that actually will inform your judgment. If you're not asking questions about things that would impact your judgment, you're missing something. If you're asking questions about things that will not make a difference one way or the other, it is a waste of time. So step number one in this process will be developing that values inventory. What do we want to know in order to make a good decision? Step number two, we actually have to create an application that identifies those specific values. So we need to then, once we do our values inventory, we know what it is we want to measure. We need to make sure that when they request funding from us, the application that they need to complete gives us that information and not a bunch of extraneous information. So step two will be actually creating an application that measures or gives us the information such that we can measure the values we want to measure. Step number three is for us to generate a scoring tool that we can use to, now I'm going to be careful about this because we had a great exchange here during that break, that creates some consistency in how we evaluate the information that we have received. Now, great question that you asked me, we were chatting before, is, well, but different people have different attitudes, they're going to score things differently, so like, how important is the scoring tool? I have a couple of answers for that. Number one, people are not as different as you think. So it is very likely to turn out that everybody is going to see certain things the same way. I mean, if you can't even make heads or tails out of that budget, there's no one who's going to say, yes, the budget was clear and easy to understand. So by identifying the areas where you all agree, you all see it the same way, you now know you don't need to spend a lot of time talking about that stuff. You want to actually focus your conversations on the areas where we don't see eye to eye. You scored more highly this particular metric. I scored it lower. Well, let's not talk about all the stuff we already agree on. We already agree on that. We don't talk about it. Explain to me, why did you score that differently? Let me explain to you why I gave it the score I did. You tell me why you gave it the score you did. We are now focused on the most meaningful conversation we can have about that application. Because I might be able to convince you, don't you understand? My expertise is in finance and you don't do that stuff. And this is why I said it. And you might say, wow, Mike, I yield. You're right. I got to change my score. Then again, you might say, hey, Mike, this is why I said this. This program does blah, blah, blah. Did you know that? And I'll be like, no. Now, of course, they might get scored at a lower score if they couldn't explain that to me. But nevertheless, you might reveal something to me I didn't quite understand. And now I'm willing to say, yeah, we should probably go your way. Or we might say, you know what? Let's just average this out. Because obviously different people see this differently. What's the average between us? We will be able to spend our time really talking about, the competition itself and what differentiates one proposal from another proposal. So that will be a great benefit. I want to reiterate, the scoring tool is not the end of the conversation. You're not gonna say, anyone who scores below a certain level doesn't get funded. Anyone who scores above a certain level will get funded. That is not the goal. We still need to rely on your professional judgment. The scoring tool is helping to steer the conversation so that you can zero in with your professional judgment on the things that need to be discussed. And the other question that came up, the other part of our side conversation was, well, people can have biases. I have a lot of history with this organization. I see it one way, you don't see it another way. First of all, it's good that people have biases. I want to soften that. Certain biases are just wrong, but some biases are based on revealable trends that other people didn't see. It's not really a bias, it's actually a judgment. So by forcing me to express my concern, that helps the conversation. But also, suppose it's a real bias. That's why you have to have more than one person do the scoring tool on each program. We need to cancel out each other's biases. I've got blind spots, you got blind spots. If we have a diverse group of individuals looking at the same proposal, then based on their professional training, their experience, and even their personal life stories, right? Diversity, I shouldn't say this in 2026 in the United States of America, but diversity is powerful because it helps us spot check ourselves.
Say it again.
It's true, right? I mean, and so if you have multiple people looking at the same proposal and seeing it differently, it allows me to ask, well, why do we see this differently? And I might find out I was terribly biased about it, or I might convince you that you were terribly biased about it. That we can cross-check, fill in each other's blind spots, correct for each other's biases when we do this as a group. But you can't do it as a group if you don't even know what you're talking about. So we need to develop a scoring tool. It's not the be-all and end-all, it's a tool. At that point, once we understand what we're trying to achieve, we've generated an application that measures the relevant information, we can score the relevant information, we then need to beta test these tools. It's possible that we missed something. We roll this out and we're asking a bunch of stuff that makes no difference, or it's just not giving us, or we're asking for stuff that the fund-ed organizations can't possibly answer. Right? How can you require that someone do something that's not feasible? So what we would need to do is then get stakeholder input. If this were the application we were going to use, how would that work? It's not, do you like it, do you not like it? Because they're all going to say, no, we just want you to give us money, we don't want you to do any of this. But what they could tell us is some valuable information about what works and what does not work. And we can tweak, we can make adjustments, we can clean up the scoring tool, maybe weight things differently, or maybe the application needs to add another question or take one away. So we can beta test this probably in a targeted way with some of our partners in the community just to make sure that it looks good. Eventually, we will then be able to operationalize the new system with real consequences, which means that actual funding decisions will hinge on this process. You are not going to get that done in the current fiscal year. Okay, you're already, I assume, at the end of April, you're already close to making funding decisions for this year. Applications have probably already been received, probably already started, if not finished, the application process. Probably what? You have a June 30 end of fiscal year?
120-day notice.
Well, right, 120, right.
First, so decisions related to funding, yes or no, are essentially already decided, it's just amounts.
Okay, some of this could impact amounts, but frankly, I think it's too late to spring this on organizations. I mean, it's just not fair to hold someone accountable to a system they didn't know they were supposed to satisfy. So my guess is that currently right now, you're in the development and beta testing zone. You can do some of that work over the summer. I mean, we'll finish this faster than that. But in terms of inviting your partners in, reviewing with them, this is what it's going to look like next year. These are the kinds of questions we're going to be asking. Bring them on board. You have all next fall to tweak. But this time next year, you should be going live with this. And there should be true real world consequences as a result. If they just blow it off and say, I'm not filling out that application, then there should be a consequence for that.
So do you have any suggestions as to how do you almost bring the organizations along as we're
Yeah.
redoing that?
Yeah, I do.
So that they're not completely caught off guard.
I don't think you should just snap this on them next November. I would suggest that over the next, I don't know how long, it all depends on availability of staff and availability of board members, et cetera, for us. We probably need a smaller working group that's going to start developing the application and the scoring tool. That's gonna have to come back to the broader group, to get it right. We're gonna have to make adjustments. At that point, you probably wanna bring in some of your community partners and share with them the direction you're going in and ask for some of their input. And you might have some reliable partners that you think would really be very constructive participants. So I think you could invite them in, I don't know, in a month or two, to say this is the direction we're going. Ultimately, the final product's gonna have to come back to the board, and the board's gonna have to vote on it and accept it, and make a commitment, this is the way we're going. At that point, you can announce it to the broader community, and I would even suggest some targeted focus sessions, like over the summer. Wait for the funding stuff to be over the summer into early fall. You should be meeting with these organizations and asking and explaining, this is the direction we're going, the board has already approved it. But be open to making some adjustments if they reveal things to you that you just didn't see coming. There's nothing wrong with you admitting there was a missing piece, and thank you for bringing that to our attention, let's clean this up. But by the end of the calendar year, you need to be able to say to all of your partners, this is the application you have to fill out this year. We can make changes next year if we realize that we got ourselves into some areas that maybe didn't make sense. We can always make adjustments to the process moving forward. This should not be a document that you do once and you never revise. This is a document that you're going to have to keep alive as conditions on the ground change. So I would suggest that you have a board and a staff group that over the next couple of months really massages this down, that you get the vote from the board to move in that direction. You could include at that point maybe some partners in the community to give you feedback. You have a final version that you approve. You sort of beta test it, you throw it out there and you say, how would this feel if this is what we were doing? Make any adjustments you need to make, and you hit the ground running next year.
So are you saying that when it's rolled out, really none of the folks who are being funded should be surprised?
They should not be surprised.
Okay.
They should not be surprised. Now, some organizations I've worked with, and I don't think you have the luxury of time on this, but some organizations I've worked with in Ohio have actually run it first year without hard consequences. In other words, they've asked everybody to use the new application, they've run through the scoring system, but they didn't use that to make, the old traditional way, they made their funding decisions with this sort of running in the background. And then they were able to ask themselves, how did our actual funding decisions match up with what our funding decisions would have been had we had gone live with the new system? And they're able to compare that and use that to make any adjustments they want to make. They might realize, wow, our funding decisions really are not rationally justified, or they might say, ooh, we need to clean this up. So at least one organization actually had the facilities or the organizations complete the application in the first year, but they didn't use it in a hard and fast way to make their decisions. So they took 3 years to sort of get this moving. First year was this, second year was let's beta test it, let's make sure everyone's comfortable with it. The third year, we're holding your feet to the fire. I don't think you need to take 3 years to put this in place. I think you can get something in place by the end of this spring into early summer that is in a good enough shape that you can share it with your partners and bring them up to speed so that next year you can actually use it. But that's a decision you guys get to make, right? Yeah.
I asked the physics question, this is a paleontologist.
Oh my goodness.
You talked about dinosaurs. How
Yeah.
does that work? We have an agency that has been doing, we have one primary agency that's doing crisis intervention, that's doing PIC something. It's the only one that's doing it.
Sure.
Are all, I'm making this up, we have 70 existing programs today. At the end of next year, right, so that they're gonna be funded through June 30th of 27.
Right.
Is the vision from what you're describing, it will be, everything is open for bid?
Absolutely.
Everything. So even if we have one agency that for the last 5 years, that's, I'm asking.
Yeah,
Because
look,
scope
but
and scale-
don't overstate the case. Yes, everything is up for review, and I don't care how big an organization you are, if you're not doing a good job, you should not get our money. However, I want to point out, and you gotta pay attention to this, the scoring tool has many, many questions on it, well, at least 13, okay? So you're measuring multiple dimensions. A low score in one of those dimensions is not going to be enough, even if it's a pretty high priority score, to knock someone out of the running. So one question that should be, or this is what we're going to have to decide, and you guys get to decide this. I'm not going to feed this to you. That's why we do a values inventory. I'll work with you to help surface some of the things that you care about, but I'm not going to tell you what to care about. I'll give you some examples. I'll talk about what I've seen elsewhere, but you guys have to define the values. One of the values that I suspect strongly is going to be an important value to you is this the sole source for this particular service? Well, if it's a sole source, which means that there's no way to provide it elsewhere, they're going to have a natural advantage in the competition because they're going to get extra points for doing something that no one else does. Does that mean that we don't have to judge them, that it should just be automatic, they get whatever they ask for? Absolutely not. But they're going to have a natural advantage in the competition. Some of your organizations are going to be like, I've been working with you for 20 years, and you've always given me money, and all of a sudden now you're going to be judging me. Well, that's not fair. I mean, I thought I would just get money forever. And we should say to them, listen, the mere fact that we have partnered for you for 20 years does not give you an advantage in the competition. You don't get points for the fact that I gave you money last year or for the last 20 years. However, if you've been in the market for that long and you've been doing good work for that long, you can demonstrate effectiveness, stability, right? There are going to be other things in the value inventory that you will naturally be able to score higher on. So in those areas, you're going to get extra points. You might lose some points in another area, but it's probably more than enough to offset. So your dinosaurs out there should not get money because they're dinosaurs. But if dinosaurs fit the environment well, they shouldn't go extinct. It's not your job to keep, and you said this, it's not your job to keep anybody in business. If they go out of business because they're bad at what they do, so be it. But it's also not your job to drive anyone out of business. If they're doing the job that needs to get done, they should get rewarded for that. The goal is to get the job done. So, a small startup, brand new, wants to enter your market. Wouldn't it be nice if you had like those coming at you constantly, right? Well, they're not going to score well on history of reliable partnership. They're not going to be able to score well on have always cooperated with putting one of your many logos on a billboard. Sorry.
He lost you now.
So they will score lower on certain areas where the organizations with history will be able to score higher. But if in your values inventory, there's another question in there that says, demonstrates innovative responses to emerging needs in the community, they're going to score very high on that, whereas the dinosaurs are going to score very low on that because they're set in their ways and they're not looking for new emerging issues. So there's no one question that's going to rule someone in or out. All of these questions will be weighted. All of these questions will be answered. Certain organizations will do well with some questions and poorly with others. It's going to end up being a composite score at the end that allows you to say, on the whole, this organization seems like one we should be funding. Yeah.
So, could one of the values be diversification of the state services? Because in the 30 years I've been involved with the mental health board, there's been a couple of agencies that are the sole provider, they go belly up, and
Yep.
we're scrambling.
Yep.
to replace
Beautiful.
that.
Absolutely fantastic point. I have said that redundancy should be scored lower, right? But resiliency should score higher. And if you only have one provider of a particular service in your community, you don't have a very resilient system. That one provider goes out, you're out of luck. So, notice, right? Again, and then you're gonna have to wait. Redundancy, resiliency, okay? So, how do we value these two and score them? I think the point is, I don't know if we have only an hour left, I don't know if you wanna start the process now. But we could just start a list, right? It's as simple as that. Let's just start listing out the things that we would wanna know or we would value when organizations ask for money. And one of those things could be, without providing excess services that are not in demand in the community, does this organization provide, I don't know what you want to call it,
Backup system.
a backup system? Yeah, I was going to say redundancy in the system, but I want to make sure we use that. Right? You want some redundancy in the system. You just don't want over redundancy. So excellent. I would just start making, or Elijah's going to start.
Here's what I'll suggest. If we all talk together, we're gonna go nowhere very fast. Let's all break up into our groups. We'll have everyone have a piece of paper. You write what the values we should be collecting here. And then we'll review them collectively in the last 15 minutes together. Does that sound like a good plan? So you can start each table with your group, talk about those things that are valuable, the things that we should be collecting as part of the process. Having them on the paper, we'll be able to collect them all together and correlate them. And maybe that will help us do some ranking here too, because if 5 out of the 7 tables are saying the same thing, that's probably something we should be looking at more closely than if Herb is malicious and
Never said malicious. Actually, that's an excellent idea, Elijah, and we will give you some time to work in small groups. I have just put back on the screen. Maybe during this time I should try to see if I can get my laptop signed. This was just one little example. Over time, I can share with you what some of your sister organizations have put in their inventory, but I don't want to steer it too much. So let's go with Elijah's.
Mine's like Robert.
How much time do you want to give them, Elijah?
We can have 40 minutes.
All right, excellent. Yeah, that's a lot. Chime in as chair of the board. You can say I'm done.
I got a bunch of my room if I can go get. Oh, yeah, I just saw you. Want to do that? Oh, okay. Oh, whatever. My writing's, I can write. No.
Just pick a table that's a little smaller, I guess. They're all about the same.
Oh, yeah, even mine.
They're gonna combine the two of them, they're gonna join other tables.
It was Mr. Brown. We got spiteful, trusting. kind of oversees.
Thank you.
Make sure people.
Thank you so much for entertaining this process and, contributing to this. I think this is a really good start for where we're going with, when we're talking about values and kind of what we would like to see as we kind of reimagine our application process. I'll tell you that, we really wanted to get to kind of populations today. We didn't get there. And that's fine. Because some of that is captured in here. So I'd like to take a couple minutes just to get your general thoughts about this, about what Dr. Gillette has shared. You can go and see these. What I will do is I'll take these and we'll kind of mush them together and see, where are we seeing the same things, where are we diverging, putting those ones that kind of are across all of these together. That's going to take some interpretation. So bear with us, and then we can go about next steps after that. So, any thoughts on where our values, what we'd like to collect, or general thoughts about today and what Dr. Gillette has shared?
I have a question. In terms of I know the application is going to be rolled out and the agencies will see it. The scoring, how much of the information, of that information, is going to be shared with the agency? Does the agency who was scored get the information? Do the competitors get the information? Everyone in the category? What happens to that information and that tool in terms of the sharing or not sharing?
Well, that's a really good question. First of all, if you make a decision and the organization asks why, you do need to be able to justify your action. So I would not suggest that you automatically give out the scores back to each of the organizations, but I think you do need to retain them such that if an organization says, well, why did you make that decision? You can explain it, and even more importantly, you want to be able to have a conversation with the organization that says, look, if you want to do better next year, here are the areas where we saw some of your deficits, and they might even reach out to you for assistance. Now, I don't know how much this board does, but some of the other boards that I've worked with in Ohio actually help with some capacity building with the organization. So if it's a small organization and it doesn't have a full-time finance person, like, do they need help with some of that financial planning? So you do want to use this as an opportunity to open up a conversation. Where are we weak? Where are we strong? What could we do to improve our score next time? It could even turn out that mid-process, one of these values, one of the questions you come up with, they just didn't answer clearly enough, and you want to call them back and say, hey, we're in the middle of evaluating these things, and it looks like maybe you missed this question, like, what's up? So I think there is definite, I would not just hand them back their score and say, here's your allocation and here's your score sheet. But I would hold it so that if you want to have a conversation, you can use it as a basis for a productive discussion. The other thing I'll have to point out, and this is something that, well, you specifically, as both board chair and attorney, are going to have to chime in on. A lot of this information could very well be covered under FOIA. So if it's a document that you are using in your decision making, is it exempt because it is a working paper? I don't think so. I don't think this is like an executive working paper that you wouldn't have to release. I think if the press called you up and said, I'd like to see all the documentation you have on your funding decision for program X, you're probably going to have to reveal it. So I don't think you can destroy it.
So, yeah, let's just put that to bed. It is a public document, but it's only a public document after we've acted upon it. So during the process itself,
Okay.
that is a confidential process. There's RFP, revised code language that we would have to follow in 340. we would follow that process, and we routinely do this. We routinely not only put the weight of what the questions are in the RFP, this is gonna be worth this many points. But we would certainly give them the scores, and we would tell them where they went, what they did well, what they didn't. The other thing we've done in the past is when somebody's asked for all the scores, because they're a public document, we've sent all the scores to everybody else. So that everybody has everything that has been requested, so.
When I was on city council, our city manager was very clear. If one council member asked for a piece of information, all council members would get it. He didn't wanna play a game where it looked like he was giving an advantage to one and not another by selectively sharing information. So it probably does make sense that if anyone says, I just wanna see how the whole system works, then it becomes an open book.
So do we have to, in terms of the questions that they're asked and the FOIA requests, I mean, are there,
There
we
should be
run
no
into-
PHI. There should be no PHI in any of this. You're not asking for, give me the names of the consumers whom you serve. You're asking, how many consumers did you serve? And according to this KPI, you know, what was your success rate?
or any information that would be considered, I don't know,
Intellectual
property, trade secrets,
We would
proprietary.
normally put in there, you know, if there's intellectual property that's submitted as a part of that, please remember it becomes part of a public document now. Once
So
we
they-
get
so
it,
they decide
Right.
whether or not to submit it.
Right.
But in terms of our, I guess, in terms of our questioning, we wanna, and if we're asking, you know, are you doing something innovative or, you know, something, so.
They should be proud of their answers. I mean, none of this should be something that's secret. You're not asking them to reveal where the bodies are buried. You're asking them to, you know,
Brag on themselves.
that's right.
Yeah, well, you'd be surprised what people consider to be their intellectual property that they're not trying to share with their competitors.
I would agree though, I would agree then with Scott, which is you probably need to notify them in advance that once they submit something to you, it becomes discoverable under the Freedom of Information Act. Unless there's an explicit carve out, like an executive working paper, a personnel document that lists the names of incumbents. I mean, they're, you know, I haven't.
we
tried
would
to
run
think
this
before.
all through
Yeah.
URL before
Oh,
our
absolutely,
prosecutors, before we would do any of this stuff anyway.
And a lot of information's available on 990s.
Well, that's true too, and those are all publicly discoverable.
Yeah.
That's a good point. And it's interesting that you, Scott mentioned before that you work only with nonprofits. Well, that's gonna be, I mean, I don't know if anyone put that on a list, but it's an interesting thing to put on a list. I mean, what if a for-profit company comes in and they can demonstrate they do something better than any nonprofit could do it? Are you just gonna automatically rule them out because they're for-profit? And if so, why? I mean, what's the basis for that judgment? I'm not suggesting you need to work with for-profits. I think there are all sorts of pitfalls in doing that. So you might have very good reasons for saying, we don't work with for-profits. But if you needed to get a job done, and they could get it done better than you could, or anyone you work with, it's a reasonable question for someone to ask, why didn't you do that? I mean, look, you guys in Ohio are getting rid of property taxes, my guess is you also wanna privatize everything under the sun. I mean, like, I wouldn't be surprised if they wanna privatize the fire department in Toledo. So, and I would not suggest you do that, but that's a value, right? Which probably went over everybody's head when you made these lists, but working with nonprofits probably is a value. And it might even be a threshold property. You gotta remember that there are properties that you measure in a weighted way, in a comparative way, right? But there are other properties that are threshold properties. Once you meet the threshold, you're in, and you don't get extra advantage beyond that. It's binary. You either satisfy it or you don't. Whether or not you're a nonprofit, it sounds like right now that's threshold property for you, right? You don't do for-profits, period, done.
Correct.
That's a value.
Is that something that we choose, or is it mandate?
Something we choose.
Provider eligibility policy. If it's in the provider eligibility policy, it's a non-negotiable threshold.
So that's definitely something that you would wanna make sure in the application it's clear at the very beginning, right? These are the minimum eligibility requirements. Failure to satisfy anything on this list, you are automatically ruled out.
Any other thoughts, reactions? Thoughts about the presentation, about the values? Anything?
I thoroughly enjoyed it.
Did you wanna have tables reported all about what they've done, or do you wanna
No, I will share,
collate that first?
yeah, looking at them, there's some consistent things. We want financial responsibility, we want outcomes, we want, alignment with, board priorities. We want them to be, we're looking for innovation, and we're looking for, quality. Quality organization that provides quality care to those identified populations. So
That triggers a thought. I'm currently working with Butler, and the phase we're in right now is something that I'm doing with Butler that I haven't done with any of the other boards I've worked with. We are in the process now of trying to define the outcome measures that we want to use. So what are the industry standards for the various types of programs that are offered? So one of the sub-projects of this, if you want to measure something like quality and you want to measure outcomes, you have to ask yourself how you're going to measure those things. So there are industry standards and there are key performance indicators for a lot of this stuff. And one thing I did not share with you, and we're not going to do it today, this gets into the nitty-gritty where we'll do this over the next few meetings, is if we go back to that summit example, this is just one little part of the first page of the spreadsheet. And if you were to scroll to the right, what you would see associated with each one of these questions is a rubric. So that when individuals are filling out their scores, they're not just left with, gee, what's your impression? They're being prompted. These are the things that would rate this high, these are the things that would rate this low. Some of them are a little more general, like what's your impression about blank, blank, blank. Some of them are very prescriptive. Score to number 1 if they have 2 or more complaints against them with the licensing board and an unresolved issue. Score them at 2 if they have complaints against them but they have been resolved. Score them at 3, all the way down. So when we operationalize this, one question, and I'm not saying you have to do this, but if you want more consistency, because we talked about this, more consistency in how the scores are derived, you can create guidelines that define your key performance indicators, your quality evaluation tools, etc.
That keeps it from being subjective.
There will always be judgment, and there should be.
But not to that degree.
But you are correct. You don't want just idiosyncratic, subjective judgment. Yes.
So could this be considered like a risk assessment on the agency?
Absolutely. One of the agencies that I work with, I don't know where you are on this, actually keeps an ongoing real-time dashboard on every program that receives its funding. So they ask for routine information, which you probably are already gathering. I'm not sure how often they gather it, monthly, quarterly, I don't know what it is. But they actually have a dashboard where they are able to, in real time, get information about outcome measures, census, all that stuff is in the dashboard. And what they want to do with their scoring tool is at least one line of that scoring, well, several of these lines, will refer to the dashboard. So you want to talk about trying to eliminate subjectivity as much as possible. Staff are responsible for maintaining that dashboard over time, but that information gets imported directly into the scoring sheet. And you know exactly what their census was, what their wait time was on their waiting lists, all of it. It's right there, boom. That's a lot of data to maintain. And I don't know if you wanna do that, or if you wanna require of them that they do that, or if you just don't wanna do it at all. But at least one of the boards I'm working with maintains that real time. I'm sorry?
Oh, no. I just,
I'm not telling you who knows what.
I've seen a dashboard recently on somebody's website, so I was just wondering.
It's a powerful tool. It is. Yeah, and,
I just have a question in general. We talked about it here a little bit at our table, but one of the things in evaluating grants or RFPs that I've run up against is a greater interest in actual true partnerships.
Good.
Like formalized, defined community partners, and having those letters of understanding, not memo, how about that? Does that feel better? A letter of understanding of what that partnership is and what it entails to be included with the RFP. Are you seeing that?
look, I do think it's valuable to measure in your process whether or not the organization does good partnering with others. I mean, that teaches you a lot about, well, he's gone right now, it teaches you about resiliency, oh, there you are, about resiliency, redundancy, leveraging. I mean, there are lots of reasons why you want to reward organizations for being good partners in the community. Remember, the whole idea here, no one of these questions is a rule in or a rule out, but you hold the purse strings. You have more power than you think. You want to incentivize certain things, and you want to disincentivize other things. So you need to create questions that put pressure on the organizations to respond positively to the things you want to incentivize and negatively to the things you want to disincentivize. Partnerships could definitely be part of it. Now, I can't really comment on what level of specificity you want to have in your actual RFP. Do you want to see all the letters of agreement? Or do you want to simply say, we have letters of agreement with X number of places? Or do you, I mean, you guys get to decide that. There is a balance, however, and I said this before, you don't want to be collecting information that's not going to actually impact your judgment. That's just onerous. So I don't know. Do you actually want to see the letters of agreement and evaluate them? Or do you just want to know that they exist? That's up to you guys to
In
figure
this
out.
particular case that I'm thinking of, it was having a better understanding of the difference between a community partner and a real formally executed, defined partnership. So,
Sure.
for example, if I am an agency that just works with children under the age of 18, but I know that there are times that these children's adult caretakers may need services, I may have a formal agreement with another agency to have a night at my facility to help work with these particular
That would be
caregivers.
That would be a wonderful thing.
Right.
So integration of services is something you could value.
Right, that's what this,
And
that's
if you
what
work
mine-
with children, one of the questions that would naturally rise to sort of the top of my brain would be, what kinds of transition planning do you build into the service plans for individuals who are 16, 17, 18 and about to age out of your service?
Exactly.
So
That's
are you
another one.
assisting in transitioning them to adult services, or do you just drop them like a hot potato when they turn 18 or 21, whatever the cutoff for that service is?
Right.
So yeah, those are great questions.
Those are the type of letters of understanding. I'm trying to avoid the word memo here because that also can get murky. But
Again,
just
though,
that-
I don't know if you
just
need
that
to.
define.
I don't know if you need to see the letters or if you need to include in the RFP or in the application a narrative that describes what they do. I mean, not all of this is going to be a check the box or give me the numbers question. Some of these questions may require a narrative box. Describe to me the service that you offer and how you offer it. Okay, it's up to you to decide, again, how much specificity you want. And do you want to be reading everybody's contracts to see if they're ironclad, or do you just want to know that they're coordinating nicely with family services that can help the adult caregivers? It's up to you to decide. I'm not, I don't think that there's an ethical issue one way or the other. I think it's a question of what you need in order to score.
Right, so we're at time. Next steps, we'll get the updated PowerPoint, and Wendy will send that out to the attendees, board staff. It'll be available in SharePoint for you to review. We have to talk a little bit more internally on the process of engaging more, because you are all volunteers and you don't have limited time. So we'll talk more internally about that. We'll correlate these and start making sense of this. And those are the immediate next steps. We'll see you back here in 2 weeks at Planning and Oversight, or 1 week, right? 1 week at Planning and Oversight.
Or Friday,
Yeah, oh yeah, it's Friday. Forgot all about that.
We'll see you
Thank
Friday morning.
Friday morning. Let's get Dr. Gillette again. Thank you.